Ladies and gentlemen, and sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Deck Chicago, one of the couple, two or three best podcasts around. So grab yourself a nice cold one and a bowl of sausage, park your keister in your French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host Sean, and this is going to be your Chicago Blackhawks episode. Before we jump in, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Rockford IceHogs. The offense for the Rockford IceHogs continued its torrid pace on Thursday as they knocked off the Iowa Wild 5-3 in a rare day game to pick up their 7th straight win. And their next home game is Saturday, November 8th versus Grand Rapids. The game starts at 7 p.m. Rockford will make their salute to the armed forces when they host the Griffins for Military Night at the BMO Harris Bake Center. In addition to recognizing past and current servicemen and women throughout the night, the first 2,500 fans will receive an IceHogs camouflage hat, courtesy of Pepsi. Check it out now at icehogs.com. So to further discuss the Chicago Blackhawks, we have Chris Block from thirdmanin.com. Make sure you check that out. And he's also a contributor to thecommittedindian.com. Well, welcome back to the show, Chris. Chris is from Third Man In and is a contributor on The Committed Indian. Great hockey guy. Love to have him on the show. Welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sean.
So I guess we'll jump right in with what is going on with the Blackhawks offense.
Well, isn't that what everybody wants to know? I think there's a little bit of everything. I think there's a lot of explanations. But I think for the most part, I think what you're really looking for is more second and third chance opportunities. I mean, there's everybody knows the way that you score in the league, and it's especially at the NHL, but at the AHL as well. I mean, you score off defensive breakdowns in coverage, lapses in coverage, odd man chances, and second and third chance opportunities. That's how you score. And if you're not working towards creating those opportunities, there's not always going to be defensive lapses. You'll go through periods and stretches of time when, you're playing teams that are dialed in to play you. I mean, that's another thing about being the Blackhawks is, the team that you're playing, the opposition isn't going to have very many nights where they're just not ready to play because you're the Blackhawks. I think there's an element to what's going on there as well, but the Blackhawks just aren't getting enough in the way of second and third chance opportunities. Some of that is on their own. Too many shots to the outside without really intent on getting those backup follow-up chances. And, some guys are just snake bit, and, we'll have to see how it shakes out. Logic would tell you that there's a flurry of goals coming around the corner. But that's logic. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work out that way. And I mean, will it get worse before it gets better? I mean, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, it just seems like this is about the point where somebody asks Coach Q about it, and he uses the term greasy goals. And then they have Jonathan Taves ends up jumping in front of the net, and Andrew Shaw, and you get a lot of guys going in front of the goalie and trying to create shots.
Well, I know that there's fans that get frustrated with that, with terminology like that, but there's an element of truth to it, and it's like I said before, there's a lot of factors or a lot of different ways to explain that the Blackhawks, being the second worst, goal scoring team in the league right now. I mean, they're number one in shots, and they're at the bottom or near the bottom in goals scored. And, again, the law of averages will correct that at some point. But that's chicken shit analysis. I mean, the fact of the matter is you've got to create your own opportunities. You create your own luck. And what I'd like to see the Blackhawks do, they have net front presence. I mean, that's not the issue. One of the things that, Sean, you'd like to see is the Blackhawks, and to be totally honest, I didn't see much of Saturday night's game in Toronto. I was at a wedding, and I've only so far skimmed through the Winnipeg game. I do have to recap that. So I've seen bits and pieces of the game over the weekend. I think they're getting to what I'm about to say a little bit more. What you'd like to see is maybe shots coming from the top of the point. You want to see more shots coming down the middle. So you've got that shot at the top of the point. You've got a guy in front of the net. So you've got two of the 4 or 5 defenders already down the middle. And that way, when you have guys on the outside, whether they're shooting from the outside or whether they're converging from the outside, you've already have defenders clogging up that middle. And and when there's a scramble for a puck, when you have like a Patrick Kane or a Taves coming from the goal line, or a Saad or a Bickle coming from the outside, you have a mass of bodies, in that crease or in that low slot, and that'll create more bounces. And I'd like to see that a little bit more. That's what you're talking about as far as greasy goals, is creating traffic in front, not just with a guy who stands in front of the net and draws a defenseman to him. You create traffic in front by moving the play down the middle of the ice. And I'd like to see the Blackhawks do that a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of it is some sheer bad luck as well. There's been countless numbers of the pipe being a better goalie than the goalie, and you're never going to go through the pipe, and just some bad luck at that in that presence. And then you just look at the shot percentage, and everybody's terrible other than Taves has a respectable one. He's about 13% of his shots. But then you look at it, the defending champion Kings, and you've got Pearson, Toffoli, Carter, Richards, Kopitar, all in the double digits percentage. So they're taking much fewer shots, but they're much more productive shots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much there is to be gained by focusing on what other teams are doing. For me, I look at where are the shots coming from? The Blackhawks shooters, where are these shots coming from? The majority of them are coming from the outside. And I'm not talking about 30 to 40 foot wristers. They're really not. That's not really the case. Outside of maybe you get Jeremy Moore, and it's the case. And a couple other guys. But what you're really looking at as far as the shot location is are guys like Saad and Bickle and Sharp, are they taking high percentage scoring shots? Are they getting high percentage scoring looks? And that's not something that they're really doing. I mean, I remember that Calgary game where the Blackhawks grossly outshot Calgary. And I remember coming away from that game just thinking the Blackhawks were terrible. The shot differential wouldn't tell you that. But, I mean, they didn't really pressure Jonas Hiller that night. They didn't make life that difficult for him. Jonas Hiller had to be active, but they weren't making life difficult for him. And, as far as like looking at other teams and comparing that to the Blackhawks, Sean, I think one of the things that would concern me about the Blackhawks, and getting back to, look at the stats, it'll correct itself. I mean, everything is going to, everything will come back to the mean or law of average. I mean, that's not analysis. I mean, it's when is it going to come back? And like I said before, does it get worse before it gets better? Right now, the Blackhawks are averaging over 5 shots a game more than they did all of last season. They're right about the same as far as what they're giving up, but they're putting a little bit more than 5 shots a game more on net than they were last year. So what does that mean? And no, we don't know, but if that's going to regress back to the law of averages or prior history, if that's going to regress, well, what does that mean? Are those 5 shots going to swing the other way? And if they do swing the other way, are those high percentage chances for the opposition? Does it get worse before it gets better? The Blackhawks start pressing. Do they start taking more chances? And that turns into offense for the opposition. The one thing that I would say about what I saw Sunday night against Winnipeg, and what would have disappointed me a little bit if I was Joe Quenneville, is you go into Toronto on Saturday night, and Toronto's not a bad team. They have, they do have definite flaws, and as an organization, I think that they're pretty pathetic. But you lose that game in Toronto, and you come back to play a Winnipeg team that essentially has 2.5 lines, and you don't score a goal. That to me is worrisome. That's you can't deny that result. And you play a young goalie, but you play a team that's got 2.5 lines, and that third line is a makeshift line that's got Dustin Byfuglien on it, and you don't score a goal. That to me is worrisome. And again, looking forward, how do the Blackhawks correct that? Do they start pressing? What I'd like to see them do more of is when a guy's got the puck, just drive to the net. What the Blackhawks need, they need more power plays. In my estimation, I think they need to drive to the net, draw penalties, work more on the power play. You can create more offense. Blackhawks fans will laugh about, the idea of the Blackhawks having more power play time, but you really can an offense really can't turn itself around by just simplifying things when you're up a man.
And to be fair, is as bad as the power play was in the first few games, it's really corrected itself, and they've been much more productive on the power play in the second half of the games they've played so far.
Yeah, well, they got 2 in Toronto on Saturday night, and that's good. But you had what did they have, 1 shot on their first power play against Winnipeg? I don't even know what they had after that, but again, I think you got it. The one thing the Blackhawks can't lose sight of is that they have to be defensively. They have to swallow the opposition. And I don't think Joe Quenneville will allow his team to lose sight of that, because what you're seeing and fans get really, and understandably, I get it, get frustrated when they see guys like Brian Bickle or Jeremy Morin, even though Jeremy Morin really wasn't benched in that game last, Thursday. But they get frustrated when they see guys get benched, like in Ottawa. But the one thing that I think Joe Quenneville is stressing right now is that there cannot be defensive lapses. There can't be carelessness in your own end, because they're not scoring. So that's the one thing that I think that he needs. He knows he can control. Joe Quenneville can't make the Blackhawks, magically start scoring goals. But the one thing from the bench that he can control is his team not losing sight of the fact that they're a great defensive team, and they won't win games if they lose that focus.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that's been really frustrating, is how many turnovers they have in front of their own goal, and you leave your goalie out on an island.
Well, I thought, the Brian Bickle one in the third period at Ottawa, I thought, that one, I didn't even blame Bickle for that. He's kind of, he's in a bad spot. The puck comes bouncing to him. He kind of just tries to, instant reaction is just try to whack it away, and it goes right to Bobby Ryan. I mean, 9 times out of 10, or 45 out of 50, that's not going to happen.
Well, the most atrocious one was the Oduya one against Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things are you feel bad for Bickle, because that could have happened to anybody. He just happened to be in that spot. But again, Joe Quenneville has to make a point. He has to make a statement, and unfortunately for Bickle, he was in that spot at that moment.
So stepping back a little bit is when the season started, were you expecting TVR to be that defenseman of that group of young defensemen that came up? And what do you think he did to leapfrog some of the other guys?
No, I didn't expect it, but honestly, and I'm not sure he belongs there to begin with, even having seen him play for a month. But over the guys that are in Rockford, I would say. But I think he's there because he's a Stan Bowman guy, number one, and we talked about this, I think, over the summer, Sean, is that the organization's a little, red asked about what happened over the summer with Kevin Hayes. And, I think it's not the whole thing, but I do think that they were looking for an opportunity to take a guy straight out of college and put him on the team to kind of prove a point, I mean, the thing about TVR that I would say is he has remarkable poise. And I think that at this stage, given, this is a kid who didn't finish his college season. I mean, obviously he trained over the off season. He was in exhibition games and that, but if real, like, live, meaningful hockey, the last time he had played was mid-January. So this is a kid that, it is impressive, and you got to give him a lot of credit. But, I still think that he would be better off in Rockford. I think that the Blackhawks would probably be better off if they would have went with Klaus Dahlbeck. I don't think Clendenning is ready, and Stephen Johns is still a little rough around the edges. But again, he's there because it's the Bowman guy, and they needed a defenseman in their mind, and it's Quenneville liked him too, but I don't know that Quenneville liked him that much more than anybody else. I think it was just that Quenneville and Bowman saw eye to eye on it, and Bowman was eager to get that college signing in the lineup in Chicago.
Yeah, I was a little surprised because I was almost positive that Dahlbeck would be in Chicago because I thought he played very well in the preseason and showed a lot, and I was a little bit surprised that TVR made it in there. Do you expect Michael Rosefall to be up there with Chicago towards the end of the season, or do you think they're going to eventually bring somebody up from Rockford? Because it doesn't look like Quenneville's in love with him, because they started the season with Rundblatt, and then when he just looked terrible, they switched over to Rosefall.
Well, I think Roosevelt right now is not going to play back-to-back. I don't know. I think Quenneville definitely likes Roosevelt, but this is a situation where he's got too many defensemen, and he's only got 7 now. Since they started committing now, but he has 7 defensemen, and 2 of them are young kids that got to play. So. I don't know. So I didn't see the third period of Toronto. I know the Blackhawks played tremendous in that third period, from all that I was told about it. But I know that Quenneville shaked up the pairs a little bit, and I don't know how much of that had to do with Roosevelt. Maybe you know more than I. But no, I think that I guess it all depends on how Roosevelt does over the long haul. I think the Blackhawks too could also, if Roosevelt's hurting down the stretch, it could be one of those disappearing acts, where Roosevelt all of a sudden it's just like he's not around, and then that could happen too. But to your point, I think it's really important that the Blackhawks get these young guys, whoever it's going to be. If it's going to be TBR, now that's fine. If Bowman is looking at Van Riemsdyk and thinking that that's his second pair next year, Hjalmarsson and Van Riemsdyk, or whatever he's thinking, which I of course don't know, but it's important that Van Riemsdyk plays every night. If that's the decision that's been made, he's got to play every night. And I also think there's got to be another guy that comes up and plays, because I'm not sold on David Rundblad. I don't know anyone who is. I don't even know if Bowman still is, but he's there. He's got to play, and they'll give him, maybe they'll give him another month or two. But if Rundblad's not a guy, if he's getting in the lineup only because Quenneville's not playing Roosevelt back-to-back nights, and we're into mid-December, I think a decision's got to be made there. Somebody's got to be moved out, and one of the guys from Rockford have to be moved up and be given that opportunity, because it's really important that the Blackhawks find 2 defensemen. And I guess Van Riemsdyk's going to be one, but it's very important that they find 2 young defensemen that, if need be, are going to be regulars in the playoffs, and obviously going forward, because there's going to be a lot of changes going into 2015-16.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my thinking was that he was going to keep Roosevelt because he's an older veteran. He's seen a lot in the NHL, and you probably don't want to have two young guys being a pair, and you're gonna, if you switch up your top pairs, you're not doing yourself a service necessarily. So I figured he was going to ease somebody in a third pair with Roosevelt and then eventually replace him. But by keeping Rundblad up, I don't know what purpose that's serving, because he's not going to be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if the organization thinks like we think, then you don't really care where Rundblad. If Rundblad's the seventh defenseman and he's only getting in, like I said, because you're easing Roosevelt into the regular season, then it doesn't matter where he is. The Ice Hogs already have 8 defensemen, and they've got a kid in Dylan Fournier that you'd really like to see in the AHL, and he's already down in the ECHL. So, sending another guy down to Rockford is just going to complicate things even more. Rockford over the weekend dressed 7 defensemen on Friday and Saturday in San Antonio because they've got too many guys. And the odd guy out was the 6'9" Victor Svedberg, and that's a guy that needs to play. He for 6'9", he's a good skater. There's a tremendous upside, whether or not he's got it in him to realize it to the NHL level. Who knows? But you got to play him. It doesn't do anybody any good for him not to play. So, like I said, Rockford's already got too many defensemen. You're not. I think that Rundblad would get through waivers, but it's not like, I don't think it's hurting anybody that he's the 7th defenseman in Chicago. And then one more point on Roosevelt, I wouldn't count him out just yet because he did get hurt. He missed some time. So it's. Maybe right now you could look at it as like his regular season. Maybe he's just getting into regular season form, like right about now. And just give him the benefit of the doubt. He played really well last year for the Hawks, and the year before as well. So he's obviously getting up there in age. The clock is ticking, but I give him a little bit more of a chance to get into the swing.
Yeah, I think my point was that he just. When it came against the Kings, he had a really rough series, and I didn't know if that was injury related or he was old and the season was just really long and weathered on him, or what it was. But I just saw him as he's definitely not the long-term solution for what they're going to do as defensemen.
Yeah, and if you're going to move him out, then odds are that Quenneville's going to want a veteran. Whether that and is that veteran, like I said, I would like it to be, Johnny Oduya drops down to the third pair, and you could trust by the end of the year, you could trust TBR and a guy like Dahlbeck on the third pair. But will Quenneville be willing to go that way, or will he, whatever veteran you give him, he'll probably play the veteran. Are you just better off with Roosevelt? I don't know. Again, I think time will tell.
So, quickly, I don't know if you know any more than I do. Was Crawford's injury a concussion?
I have no idea. No idea.
I just was curious if you had heard anything. But with the goalie situation, watching Darling play in Rockford and playing in Chicago, he definitely played better when he was in the Hawks uniform than I feel like he did in Rockford. Not that he played bad there. But do you think he earned enough to displace Antti Ranta as the backup, or do you think he's just better off going back down to Rockford?
No, because I think you started to see in that Ottawa game that teams are just going to go 5-hole on him. So, I think that, it'll do him some good to go back to Rockford and just get in some games. I think the problem with him going to Rockford, and it's the same with Antti Ranta, is, he's just going to split time. I don't think Darling will be the guy. But my thoughts on Antti Ranta are just, he's just a guy. So if you're really looking to develop a number 2 guy that you can truly, be totally confident in if anything ever happens to Crawford, then Darling, it was the right move for Darling to go back. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he would have given up 1 goal against Ottawa. if he would have given up one goal against Ottawa, I think the decision might have been a little different. But giving up 4, it was easy to send him back. But I think in any event, it was the best decision to send him back because he's just going to get more work, and that's what he needs. Especially if if those big long legs are a little slow to close, that was going to get exposed real quick at the NHL level. So he needs to go back down and work on that.
Yeah, it is nice to see though some young talent there in the goalie pool, because
they're definitely in a better position now than they were last. Because there's nothing wrong with Antti Raanta. He's just never going to be a number one. He's serviceable backup, athletic guy. He's going to make some spectacular saves. So he can. I think Raanta's a guy though that excels the more work he gets. He's kind of like a Craig Anderson in Ottawa. Craig Anderson seems to excel when he really gets peppered with shots. I think Raanta's the same kind of guy. I think he thrives on workload. So being a backup really isn't a thing for him. But Scott Darling's definitely got some potential. People love to throw around that sample size phrase, and there's not really that great of a sample size on Darling, which is another reason why I think it was imperative that he goes back and he gets as much work in Rockford as he can.
Yeah, it doesn't faze me at all. It was nice to see him be able to get a chance though to come up and play, and I think it was nice to see the hometown kid come in and be able to do well in the first 2 games he played.
I was really surprised though, and there's some things that Joel Quenneville does that really puzzle me, and going back to back with Corey Crawford was one of them. I mean, I think on one hand I understood it because it was the head coach stressing the importance of coming out and winning against Winnipeg last night. Unfortunately, that message didn't really filter down to the team, but skipping Raanta last week because Darling played so well, and then back to back Corey Crawford coming back off an injury, you throw him back at the back-to-back nights, skip Raanta again. Quenneville has a history of really messing with goaltenders' heads, and whether he does it intentionally or not, he does. And I don't think that it does the Blackhawks any good to kind of write off Antti Raanta at this stage, because there's no guarantee that Darling will ever live up to the excitement that his brief Blackhawks career to this point is really brought.
Oh yeah, nobody's anointing him to be the next coming, but it was nice to see that we've at least upgraded the talent in the pool for the goaltender position, because last year was a little bit abysmal with the Rockford goalie situation.
Yeah, Kent Simpson, who's gone now, and Matt Carruth seems to be a guy that they've really lost confidence in.
Yeah, he got sent down to Indy.
Not only that, but there wasn't even a thought entertained about playing Carruth while he was in Rockford. So, while Darling was up, so that doesn't bode well for Carruth. But maybe he could turn it around, play well in Indy. Not really, too confident in that. But they're definitely in a lot better place this year than they were last, for sure.
So let's see. What about, have you had a chance to check out any of the Rockford games so far?
Oh yeah. Not the games over the weekend, but everything before that. Yeah.
What do you think so far with what you're seeing there? Who's captivated you? Who's looked good? And what do you think about the team?
Struggling outside of this past weekend, struggling to score goals there as well. This weekend, they put up 5 and 6 over the weekend, so it kind of came around. But we'll see how that works out. The same thing could happen with the Blackhawks. They could have a 2-game offensive explosion and then go back down to where they're scoring 1-2 goals a game and then be right back in a funk. Rockford, defensively, they've been good, and the penalty kill, which could have only gotten better from last year because they were the worst in the league, almost set a record for inefficiency in the AHL. The last year's penalty kill, but yeah, the penalty kill's been better. The goaltending is a lot better, and that's really what's carried them. Defensively, they move the puck really well. They just don't have. They don't have a lot of pure goal scorers up front. Teravainen really hasn't gotten going yet. Mark McNeil's been okay. Joakim Nordstrom's a solid player up and down, but he's not really a goal scorer. Garrett Ross got going over the weekend, which was good to see because they really need him to be one of their goal scorers this year. And, it's been kind of goal scoring by committee outside of that.
Yeah, I was a little excited after the first 2 games with Ryan Hartman, but then, he fell off a little bit.
Wow, the one goal that he scored opening night got taken away from him. He didn't actually score that goal, but I mean, he's a young, he's a young kid. It's this is his first real season. He only got in a little bit at the end last year, so you kind of cut him a little bit of slack. The guys that you really need to show up this year and carry the load are McNeil, Garrett Ross in his second year, Philip Deneau's, really got to step up and be that two-way center that you need. Peter Regan's been pretty good there. Like I said, it's Teravainen. Teravainen had a couple of games where I was really disappointed in him. He's just kind of a guy, and that's not what you're looking for from him at all. I mean, the one problem that I have over everything with Teravainen being in the AHL, which there's definitely things that Teravainen, can work on in Rockford. It's not like he's fully polished, ready to go NHL player sitting in Rockford unfairly. I mean, there's definitely things that he can work on there. Face-offs, the little intricacies of playing on the smaller ice surface and working with working in traffic, creating his own space on the smaller surface. He seems to be much better this year with the north-south game and moving pucks up. But the one thing that concerns me about him is he thinks the game faster than just about anybody else on his team. And, he thinks the game at an NHL level. He thinks the game at an NHL speed. But he's playing in the AHL. So it's almost like he's got to, this is unfair, but he's almost like he's got to dumb himself down. Because a lot of, there were times in a couple of games that I was at so far this season where I saw him he was making passes that weren't connecting, but it wasn't really on him. He was seeing a guy who, he was leading for a pass, and by the time that, say it was Garrett Ross, by the time Garrett Ross realized that Teravainen had spotted him and was leading for a pass, he was already a half step behind the pass. And, things like that, Teravainen was passing to a spot, and again, it was poor recognition. I don't know that serves him well in the long term. But he definitely needs to shoot more. That's definitely an issue. But he's got terrific hockey sense. Like I said, he's got an NHL mind now. He's got NHL instincts now. For his sake, I hope that he's not down there too long, because I don't think it does him. It's like you get back to a guy like Jeremy Morin. Jeremy Morin was just in the minors way too long. And some of that was his own fault, Jeremy Morin. But, some guys, there comes a time when they have to make the jump, or you start doing them a disservice. And I really think that if we get into mid-December and Teravainen's still on the AHL roster, I don't know what that does for him, because he's on the verge, if not should be in the NHL right now. And, his numbers don't jump off the page at you, but, I think some of that has to do with the players that he's playing with.
So jumping a little bit around is with with Carcillo getting injured is I think we've all read what the committed Indian thinks of Carcillo, and I can't say that I blame him too much. He's proved to be a mostly penalty machine for the last several years, but to give him some credit, he added some energy to that fourth line that they looked pretty good up until his injury. Do you think that Carcillo was a good spark and a good pickup, or do you think that he just sort of was a flash in the pan that now that he's injured's done for?
Well, he'll be back. I mean, I think it's more the latter, though, to your assessment. I think, I've never understood and I've never liked the Carcillo signing. The 3 times that Stan's done it now. And it has nothing to do with that, the tough guy or the enforcer role or anything like that. It's just Carcillo, he takes unnecessary penalties. I think he goes, whether he's mindful of it or not, he definitely he puts guys, opposing players in really tough spots sometimes and at injury risk. And I just don't know that you really need that guy in the NHL. So I have a problem with it from that perspective. If they weren't where they're at right now with the cap, I think that, and they're really trying to save money to bring Teravainen up. That's why they didn't, when Carcillo got hurt, I was in Rockford the night that Carcillo got hurt. And I interviewed Brandon Mashinter after that game. And because Mashinter scored the game-winning goal in Rockford, and so we were interviewing him, and I had read the Carcillo thing, on Twitter, and a couple of people had texted me about it, so I knew about it, but I was at the Rockford game, so I wasn't really thinking about the Blackhawks. And I'm standing in front of Mashinter after the game, and I'm like, all of a sudden it came to me, I'm like, oh my God, Carcillo got hurt tonight, and I might be standing in front of the guy that's about to get the tap on the shoulder and told to pack his bags. And I mentioned it to Mashinter, and his eyes lit up, and he was thinking the same thing. He was, he wasn't, he's very, he concealed his, his reaction. But I think if the Blackhawks weren't conserving cap space, like I said, I think a guy like Mashinter or PC Labrie would be up. But, getting back to whether inserting Carcillo in the lineup or not when it comes back, I think this is an interesting time, because if the Blackhawks can get through a month, and I guess that's what they're saying about Carcillo, if the Blackhawks can get through a month without Carcillo or a type of player like that in the lineup, will Joe Quenneville and Stan Bowman be more apt to go without it? And I know that a lot of people would like to see that. I still think that you're going to have a Carcillo or a Mashinter or somebody like that on your roster. I still think that player plays in games. But, again, it's kind of all up to Jeremy Morin, And so far, I know people are in love with Jeremy Morin and he can do no wrong, but he does plenty wrong. And, he's got – this is his chance. This is his chance. And he's only got a couple weeks left of that chance. And he's got to perform at a higher level to, make that decision very difficult for Quenneville. When Carcillo comes back, Jeremy Morin has got to get to a point where Quenneville just says, I can't afford to take Jeremy Morin out of the lineup. And that we're not at that spot yet. So to answer your question, I think at this point, if it were to happen tomorrow in Montreal, where the Blackhawks are on Tuesday night, no, I think Carcillo would be back in.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about Morin. I talked to so many people, and they all seem to be drinking the Kool-Aid for Jeremy Morin, and I don't think he's awful. I just don't see what they're seeing.
Yeah, with Morin, it's the positioning away from the puck. It's offensively, it's not moving. It's not creating passing lanes. He's sort of kind of just drifting And, it's whoever has the puck, it's kind of their job to create a passing lane for him. He doesn't get to the wall quick enough. He doesn't support the puck well enough. His positioning in all three zones is a little suspect. He's better, than he was last year when Quenneville was all over Jeremy Morin's case last year when he came up and really dissatisfied with Morin. He's definitely better this year. A little bit, but there's still all issues that are dangling there. His shot selection is just brutal. He's the guy that really I would just like to see Jeremy Morin get the puck and just put his head down and skate to the net and dare someone to just drag him down. Like that's what Jeremy Morin should be doing, because his shot is good, but he's not going to score from 30 feet out or on those bad angle shots, that he takes from beyond the faceoff dot deep in the zone. He's not going to score from there. And he's definitely not going to create scoring chances if he's constantly trying to pick corners from those angles. So either bury your head, skate as hard as you can to the net, and dare a defenseman to drag you down and create power plays, which is going to get you in the good graces of Joe Quenneville and Kevin Dineen and Mike Kitchen. Either do that or drive as hard as you can in the net, bury your head, and take a shot and aim for the goaltender's pads. That's what's going to create scoring chances. And the more that I see of Morin skating into poor score, shooting, high percentage scoring positions, and trying to pick corners from bad angles, the more I just shake my head, and it's like I like Jeremy Morin. I think he's a great kid. I think all that time he spent in the minors wore on him. I think he's an emotional guy, but I want to see him do well. But the more I see of him, it's like you don't get it. You got it. It's a simple game, especially when you're playing on the bottom two lines. It's a simple game, and I think that's why Joe Quenneville is so. This is getting off topic, but let's just talk about it with that third line. While Joe Quenneville is so obsessed with that third line. It's a simple game. And being on the Blackhawks' third line, which Jeremy Morin kind of is at the moment, it's a revolving door third line because Quenneville's so dissatisfied with it. But, being on the third line, if you're an offensive player, being on the Blackhawks' third line is a gift. It's a blessing. Because when you're on the Blackhawks' third line, your line doesn't check anybody, and your line doesn't get checked. So all you have to do is possess the puck and create scoring opportunities. All you have to do is score goals. And Joe Quenneville's happy with your line. That's what over time, when the Blackhawks have won Stanley Cups, when they've been a dangerous team, no matter where they finished at the end of the year, they're a dangerous team because they have three lines that score. And they have a fourth line that pitches in, and Joe Quenneville can also use as a checking line, which in more recent years is what's made the Blackhawks such an elite team, is that their fourth line shares checking responsibilities with Jonathan Toews. And that third line, all they have to do is score. And when they're not producing, Joe Quenneville's not happy because, again, that's all they have to do. Like it's the most unique third line situation in hockey because they don't check anybody and they don't get checked. So why isn't it producing? And that's why Joe Quenneville gets upset with it. And if I'm Jeremy Morin and Brian Bickle or Versteeg or Shaw, whoever's on that line, Brad Richards, that's all. You just simplify the game and create scoring chances. And that's, I think, what Jeremy Morin needs to focus on.
Well, I think we've talked about enough as we can for 12 games. It's a long grind. It's a long season. I think it's kind of pointless to look at the standings right now because there's teams that definitely are not nearly as talented as the Hawks that are ahead of them, and that's going to even out at the end of the season. But is there anything else you wanted to add?
I would just add to that. I would say that you're right about not obsessing about the standings, but we're getting into that territory where I think that it is important. Maybe not here on November 4th, but as we get into next week and the following week as we approach Thanksgiving, I think it's very important. So I think it would be the Blackhawks. What have they got? for three home games in a row after this Montreal game. I think that it's really important that they win 3 of these next 4 and get themselves way north of that Mendoza line and or the 500 mark. And because the last thing that you want, I don't care how talented you are, the last thing that you want is to be chasing, from January on, because the numbers say that the Blackhawks will start scoring goals and their average will come up and all that. But how long will it take? Last year, numbers people told you about Colorado, and Colorado was going to fail, and they were a mirage and all of that. But it took until the playoffs for that to come true. Are the Blackhawks going to? I don't think that it'll take the Blackhawks until the playoffs to score 4 goals a game. But if it takes 3 more weeks, where are they in the standings in 3 more weeks when that happens? And like I said, the Blackhawks put themselves in that position in 2011 where they were chasing, and come playoff time, they had nothing left. And I think it's really important that they get this thing turned around here with some home cooking. It's some tough competition, but hey, that's the position you put yourself in when you don't show up on a Sunday night against Winnipeg.
Well, thanks a lot, Chris, for being on the show. Make sure you check out Chris at the thirdmanin.com. He's always writing great stuff. He's, as you can tell, great, knowledgeable hockey guy. So we love having you on the show. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Always love having Chris on the show. He's a really knowledgeable guy about the Blackhawks, and you get a really good insight about the game and the team. So that's going to be it for this episode. We'll be back after the Bears game on Sunday, so make sure you check it out. If you don't already, subscribe to us on iTunes. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Swerski Sports. Go to our website, swerskisports.com. On Twitter at Swerski Sports, and you can follow us also on Stitcher or any other podcast channel that you choose to listen to. And thanks a lot for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Denver New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.